Rugby Union.
It's one of the best tracks in the world. It's one of the best races on the calendar. It always has been, and it's just a marvel on every level. It's Japan and Suzuka.
It really is, isn't it? And I think, Jack, because we've gone Singapore and then straight into Japan, it gives you this feeling that the F1 calendar is now complete again.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of back to normal, isn't it? After a couple of seasons where we always seem to do was race in Austria, it's nice to go back abroad a little bit and a race in Japan and a race in Suzuka. And after Singapore, it's great. And it's always got that unique feel about it, Japan, hasn't it? And it's got the passion of the fans, and it's got the history. You know, it was in, they've been racing in Japan since 1976, but that was the first Japanese Grand Prix in 1976. Then there was a bit of a gap until Suzuka came in 87. But it's, a long fixture on the calendar.
Certainly is, and it's a fixture where Max Verstappen could become world champion. It's his second chance to do it. This one probably a bit more straightforward when it comes to the mathematics. If he wins it and gets fastest lap, he will be champion. He has to outscore Charles Leclerc by 8 points and Sergio Perez by 6 points. That's the crux of it. So, Sam Bird, do you think he's going to do it? I've got my maths wrong, haven't I? Andrew Benson.
Yeah, 10 points Perez, Jenny. And
Apologies.
8 points Leclerc.
Yes, that way round. Sam?
He is going to do it. Of course he is. I think everybody knows it's
But no,
it's a
this
formality.
weekend.
I know. This weekend, I'm not sure, Jenny. I'm not sure, especially with the conditions that we're seeing in front of us now. I'd like to think that there's still another weekend in this championship fight. That's what I'm hoping for. But given the form that he's on, given the form that Red Bull have and the car underneath them, I really can only see Max Verstappen scoring maximum points again this weekend. That's my personal view.
And the thing is, if he wins and Leclerc finishes second, let's say, and so the championship is kept alive, it'll be kept alive by like a point. So we'll go to Austin knowing that Leclerc will need to win and set fastest lap with Verstappen not scoring any points in order to keep the championship alive there. So then it just becomes almost more of a sort of default thing in Austin. It'll just be like, well, if Verstappen finishes the race, then he wins the championship. It'll be that simple. So at least we've got a bit of jeopardy this weekend.
We have a little jeopardy, and I'm sure Liberty Media, who have come in and taken ownership of this sport, would be delighted if this championship would go to America or Mexico rather than be one in Japan. I mean, Japan's the most historic track. It's beautiful. However, the time zones are fairly ugly for all of us. Let us know where you're watching. Hashtag BBC F1. If you're listening to us, what are you doing right now? Send us a picture, and the session has gone green light.
It's, I guess it is, yeah. West Coast is not too bad, is it? Japanese Grand Prix, I suppose. Because what's the time now on the West Coast? It must be 8 p.m. So I guess the race is getting underway at 10 p.m. But then that's sort of early hours on the East Coast, isn't it? So,
well, why don't we just go over to the West Coast then?
I'm up for that. Shall we?
I've got fond memories of watching Japanese Grand Prix. I've got a vivid memory of watching Damon Hill crossing the line in 96, and I've been very fortunate that Williams have given me the opportunity to drive that exact chassis.
No way.
On a few occasions.
Really?
Yeah.
What, like Goodwood and stuff? Or where did you drive it?
I drove it at Goodwood. I drove it around the Williams car park once to shake it down, and then I've been on an airfield and shaken it down as well. But still, to sit in that car, championship winning vehicle, is pretty cool.
For those of you wanting to sync up, 58 minutes and 4 seconds on the clock. Sebastian Vettel is just putting his balaclava and helmet on. There are a couple of people dressed up as racing drivers in the grandstand. We've got a Vettel dressed up in the Aston Martin kit, and then you've got a Yuki Tsunoda gentleman with a Yuki Tsunoda helmet, and then you've got a James Hunt man in a Renault. Oh no, it's a Raikkonen helmet. It's a Raikkonen replica helmet. It's got when Raikkonen had his James Hunt tribute, and I was confused because he was wearing a Lotus racing overalls. But yeah, it's the Raikkonen tribute helmet. They love dressing up as the drivers. There was one dressed as Senna, I remember, a few years ago in the full Rothmans livery with the Senna replica helmet, which was a little bit eerie, honestly. And I remember in a load of McLaren fans with DRS hats. They all had these like helmets on with rear wings on top of the helmets, and they all had a little string that they could pull to ping the DRS flap open.
You got to love the Japanese fans, but
yeah.
Can you imagine attending a Grand Prix in the rain wearing full race suit and helmet all day? I mean, Sam Bird, you're familiar with wearing full race suits and helmets.
It would be uncomfortable sitting in the stands in full race kit. I mean, what do they do if they're that dedicated? What do they do if they want to have a coffee? Do they use a straw?
Does the visor mist up in the rain? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, they'll have a drinks tube, surely.
Yeah.
And they'll wire it into their, like a backpack or something.
To a camelback, absolutely.
Yeah. So no running as of yet. As I say, wet out there, but it's not horrendous conditions. It's not sort of, oh no, we're never going to get any running in this session.
No, and one thing to look forward to is free practice 2, where we've got an extra half an hour of running, presumably in the wet, where the FIA have given all the teams a new sort of hybrid slick tyre to try out. So that'll be enjoyable for them in the wet conditions.
One of the problems, of course, is that there are limited wet tyres. 3 sets of wets, extreme wets, I should say, as a Haas heads out on exactly that tyre. And 4 sets of intermediates for the whole weekend, which kind of annoys me that there's so few wet tyres available to everybody. And it means that when you have a day like this, when it's going to be raining all day on Friday, and it's probably not going to be raining on Saturday or Sunday, well, it's less bad, I suppose, than if it would be raining on Saturday and Sunday, because then they really would be saving them. But even so, because there's a risk of rain on Sunday, they don't want to be chewing through all their sets of tyres, so they will limit their running.
Kevin Magnuson has gone out on circuit in the Haas. He's coming through the S's, and you can hear a polite smattering of applause from the fans who have braved the elements. And thank you to those of you who are braving the elements in the morning. Morning to Else. Morning to Tom, who says, I've been up all night, so I didn't oversleep. Wide awake in Dorset. So, good commitment there, Tom. And Eleanor saying, finally, time zones are not ugly for Australia. Listening via earbuds while working. So, have a lovely day at work. And Supercharger Heavens has just got off work in Japan. There we go. And also asks how many titles have been won or decided at the Japanese Grand Prix. I don't know the answer to that, but I'll look into it, because a decent amount. Jenny?
I actually do know the answer to that. I know, it's almost scary, isn't it? 11 world titles have been won there. 1 in Fuji, so 12 in total at the Japanese Grand Prix. 8 constructors' titles as well. And if you really want to get into the minutiae, which of course you do at this time of the morning, 2nd world titles won here. Senna in 90 won his 2nd, Hakkinen in 99, and Vettel in 11 all won their 2nd world titles here. And George Russell, to bring us back to Japan and right now, they've had to swap his power unit over for his race power unit already. He sprung an oil leak this morning, so they're just finishing that process down at Mercedes, but a slight bump in the road already for their weekend.
Have you got rookies, Suzuka rookies in your locker, Jenny?
Have I got them? No.
That's mine if not, because I just realised that I don't either. So it'll probably be the same ones as in...
I mean, I could have it in my locker very quickly. Would you like me to have it in my locker quite quickly?
Yeah. You got anything else?
Caller, hold the line.
One very special Suzuka rookie is, of course, Max Verstappen, who had his very first outing in a Formula 1 car at a Grand Prix weekend in Japan in 2014. Aged 17 and 3 days, I believe.
Yeah, you're right. I'd forgotten about that. Very true. 53 minutes and 3 seconds to go. Here's Yuki Tsunoda.
There's a couple of rivers after Sector 1.
Couple of rivers after Sector 1, says Tsunoda, and there are quite a few, quite undulating, this circuit, Sam, so I guess you're going to get a few rivers here and there.
You are, yeah. You're going to have areas where the water sort of flows across the circuit. We saw that going out of turn 1-2 and through where the track winds up towards the end of Sector 1. We are seeing a replay of Yuki Tsunoda. It does look very wet out there, Jack, at the moment. We've seen exploratory laps from Kevin Magnuson and Yuki Tsunoda, but no one else at the moment has braved the circuit.
So, Jenny, I'm going to guess. Who am I going to guess? Am I just going to guess? I'm going to go Latifi, Joe and Schumacher.
You are correct, although I would also
fantastic.
put Tsunoda into that category, even though he has raced here before and he is a graduate of the Suzuka Circuit Racing School.
How's he possibly a rookie then?
But he's a rookie when it comes to Formula One. I'm going to just lob that in. He's never done a Formula One race here, but he has obviously good experience of this track.
Yeah, but if someone's raced a track in F2, we don't call them it's their first time at this circuit, do we?
Well, we did last time out because they hadn't driven F2 at Singapore.
No, I think you're a rookie if you've never driven here before. He did Japanese F4, didn't he, Tsunoda?
He did.
So, yeah. There's a few circuits in Japan I'd like to go to. Okayama looks really cool. I don't know. You must have done Fuji.
I have done Fuji, indeed. I've won at Fuji in the World Endurance Championship. Great circuit.
Have you done Fuji, Benson?
I haven't, but Autopolis is supposed to be mega.
Oh, yeah. Sugo. I might be out of Japanese race circuit.
TI circuit. How could you forget the TI circuit? AIDA, yeah.
AIDA. I never knew how to say it. There's one more where the Fanatec GT World Challenge Asia, powered by AWS, went this year, and I can't remember where it was. Did you not keep track of it?
I did not.
It went down to the wire. It was a really entertaining season, yeah, genuinely. Magnuson and Tsunoda did an install lap. Magnuson did a couple of laps and then returned to the pit lane. Amit Mandalia, while there are no cars running at the moment, but congratulations to Sam Bird for completing the London Marathon last weekend.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
How was it?
Really good fun. The crowd make it what an amazing event. Because of the crowd, they really do make it. My legs are 80% back to normal.
Really?
I haven't tried running on them again.
Had you done marathon distances beforehand?
No. The furthest I'd done in the training,
5K.
Was about 18, 19K.
K?
Yeah. So
that's like half, isn't it?
Less than half. So then just to go out and do that was quite difficult, and it became really tough with about 6 miles to go.
Yeah.
6 miles to go, you do hit a wall, and then it's about mind over matter and just getting the job done.
Do you listen to stuff while you run?
I did, but my headphones ran out, and I think it was the best thing because then I could experience the crowd over the last sort of 6-7 miles, and they're cheering you on, they're willing you on, and that passion, you really feel that, and that drives you forwards. And I had a chat with Anthony Joshua about 4 miles from home. So that was quite good, yeah. He was doing one of the drink stops with Lucozade.
Yeah.
And, well, I was tired. and I fancied a chat, so I stopped and had a chinwag with Anthony Joshua, which was great.
What was your time? Just out of interest.
It wasn't what I wanted, Jenny. It was 3 hours 18.
Oh, 3:18. Oh, that's good. I mean, that's really good.
See, I think that if I trained for it, I should be closer to 3 hours flat or in the high 250s.
You know I like you, don't you, as a person? But you saying, I mean, I think I did 5 hours 19 when I did mine. It was absolutely the last 6 miles took 6 hours, I think, in themselves. Luke Smith, by the way, also ran the London Marathon last weekend in memory of his mother, and the pictures of him running it, my goodness, looked absolutely brutal. Any chafage, Sam?
No chafage. I think, well, the toughest bits, as I said, were the final 6 miles, and then I had a great race mid race with Spider-Man. So there was a very good runner dressed as Spider-Man, and he pulled up alongside and started to pull away, and I thought, well, there's no way I'm letting a man dressed as Spider-Man pull away, so I had to pick up the pace, and that was probably the highlight of my race.
Luke Smith, of course, is an esteemed colleague in the Formula One Media Centre. He's not there this weekend, I'm guessing, because his tender parts are still recovering. My battle at the end was with one of the giant rhinos. I wasn't letting him beat me either. I was like, oh, good work.
But it is, I would, to anybody listening who hasn't ever competed or thought about competing in it.
Jack Nicholls.
Yeah, do you know what? There's people from all walks of life with all kinds of fitness abilities, but just get out there and do it. It's something that you should experience in your lifetime and raise a little bit of cash for a chosen charity at the same time. It's an incredible experience, and it really has opened my eyes a lot to giving and putting your body through something for the greater good.
Nicholas Latifi, Mick Schumacher and Lance Stroll all currently doing installation laps on the full wet weather tyre as they now return back to the pit lane. So Magnuson, Tsunoda, Latifi, Schumacher and Stroll have all done an install lap. Hamilton's the engine you can hear firing up. He's just getting strapped into his Mercedes and ready to head out. There was someone who did the London Marathon in full F1 gear, I think, wasn't there? In full, like, racing boots and a helmet and everything, like the Japanese fans here in the grandstand.
Well, that's what Jaguar TCS Racing wanted me to do at the beginning. Yeah. As we see a replay of Mick Schumacher. Wonder what's going to happen here. Anything interesting? Nope. Nope, nothing interesting.
There we go. It was last year. It was last year. It was a guy called George Crawford, and he ran it in full racing gear that was loaned to him by the Aston Martin team. The suit, the boots, the gloves, and Lance Stroll's helmet that he used at Spa, Zandvoort, and Monza last year.
I think the rest of it would be okay, but the boots would be awful because you want comfortable running trainers, ideally.
Brutal. Stroll, speaking of him, is coming through the chicane at the end of the lap, through the right and then the left, and then drops down the hill. Schumacher is doing a proper lap here, so he's come just through the middle sector now, and Stroll is going to do a lap 2. Across the line, down towards turn 1 and 2, pretty big plume of spray coming off the back of the car as he splashes through the river on the run down in towards turn 1. Swings it right into turn 2 and then makes his way up into the S's. Favourite corner at Suzuka?
130R.
Yeah?
Yeah, I would say so. Into these conditions, you want to be running as much as you can, or in an ideal world, you know, if it's drivable, you'd stay out there and get confident and comfortable with the conditions. But the problem, Andrew, is that they've only got a limited amount of these wet tyres, haven't they? So they can't really go out and just pound around.
No, and they don't want it because there's a forecast for some rain on Sunday as well, so they don't want to waste their tyres, basically. So could be a long day for all of us. Favourite corners at Suzuka. 130R, is that even a corner anymore? I mean, it's flat in a dry, isn't it? I know it's iconic. Here's some radio.
Track is quite dry, it's not so much standing water.
No, Stroll, that's not the greatest feedback, I think. I get where he's coming from. I think he's saying it's not that wet, but he's ended up saying it's quite dry, and I think those are two very different things there from Stroll, but saying there's not much standing water. But yeah, I was surprised you went for 130R as well.
Just so many... I've got so many cool onboards in my head of that corner. One of them being Kamui Kobayashi facing the barrier on the inside and doing the most outrageous catch. I think it was in 2011, 2012? I'm not sure whether that's the same year that he got on the podium, but he certainly had an enormous moment there. Then you've got the overtakes on with Alonso and Schumacher going through that corner. Just really cool.
That was awesome, yeah. I like watching at Suzuka's good. So between 3 and 4, there's a wall that you can sit on, and just it's like the best view. There's like nothing obstructing your view at all. You got and then if you can brave Spider Alley, which is sort of the gap in the barrier, which is about a shoulder width between the barrier and the debris fence on the way to the Degners, with these absolutely massive spiders above your head.
I've never seen spiders that big in my life. It's unbelievable. Here's Leclerc's radio.
I actually think that we could already go on into.
So Leclerc saying we could go on to intermediate tyres already. He is out on circuit. Schumacher's done a 52.5.
I have seen spiders bigger than that because I've seen a tarantula in the wild in Arizona or Utah, one or the other. But they're not as big as a tarantula, but they are pretty scary. Yeah. But yeah, and Degner, of course, is great to watch at as well, because you're sort of on a hill overlooking the two corners. There's usually butterflies dancing around there. You've got the mountains on one side, the sea on the other, because you forget that Suzuka's coastal, hence the weather, I guess. It's a great place to wander around and watch Formula 1 cars.
I just turn 2 is one of the most amazing places I've watched F1 cars. I remember, I think it was 2014. Because back in those days, F1 was still on the telly, and the BBC didn't let me do free practice sessions because they didn't trust me if it was going to be on the telly. If it was on the radio, they were like, yeah, fine, you can do it. But when it was on the telly, a man called Mark Wilkin would never trust me to be on the radio.
You're still hurting, are you, Jack?
No, I'm completely over it. But it meant that I had Fridays off, so I could just walk around the circuit. And I'm stood there at turn 1. Or at turn 2, and the cars just fire into view, turn right, flat out at like 180 miles an hour, and then suddenly they've turned through turn 2 already, and they're gone. It was remarkable stuff. Leclerc does a 1 minute 49.103, 8 tenths quicker than Carlos Sainz in second in the Ferrari. Mick Schumacher in third position, 1.2 seconds back from the Ferraris, all on wet tyres. Bottas and Joe are now out on circuit 2, along with Norris and Hamilton. So quite a few drivers heading out and cracking on. Jenny?
Yeah, George Russell not heading out or cracking on, and they're still working on that replacement power unit after his oil leak earlier on this morning. So the car's still up on the stands as opposed to on Lewis Hamilton's side in the Mercedes garage. The car all sorted. And just an update on Schumacher. He had a huge lock-up on the front left of those extreme wet tyres, but it's an extreme wet tyre. They're a little more forgiving than a slick, I suppose. I think he would have taken it down to the carcass if it had been on a slick.
Yeah, well, he's still lapping at the moment, is Schumacher in the Haas. Joe is coming into the first 2 corners now. The 2 right-handers, and then heading up towards the S's. Norris out on circuit. So at the moment in the pits, Verstappen, Ricciardo, Gasly, Perez, Alonso, Ocon and Russell. Those are the 7 drivers that have yet to head out onto the circuit. Joe is coming up through the S's. And yeah, because I think he did Joe do Formula Pelota? I can't remember, but not raced at Suzuka before, as he comes now into the 2 Degner corners, 3.3 seconds down on Leclerc in the first sector alone. But as you say, Sam, it's just about getting comfortable with the track and the conditions, I suppose.
Absolutely, and you know, we've heard quite a few drivers now saying that even though it looks very wet, very treacherous on screen, watching here in a studio in London, the drivers are reporting that they want to go on to the Inter tyres already, which is very surprising.
Joe did the Formula 3 Asian Championship, but it was basically a Middle Eastern Championship, really. Dubai, Yas Marina were the 2 places that it raced. So, and that was only last year actually for Joe. So yeah, never competed in Suzuka before. Started his career in Italian Formula 4, finishing second in 2015 to Ralph Aaron. I forgot about Ralph Aaron, the Estonian. He always looked quite decent. 38 minutes and 40 seconds to go. Joe across the line. There's a 1 minute 54.648, 6.5 seconds slower than Charles Leclerc. Carlos Sainz is improving on this lap. He's just coming through 130R now, and then onto the brakes, into the chicane, out across the line, and Sainz finds about 4 tenths of a second compared to his previous best, and is now half a second slower than Charles Leclerc. Mick Schumacher third quickest. He's just been through the pits, but he's gone back out again. Valtteri Bottas 4 seconds ahead of Joe in 5th. Bottas won the last Japanese Grand Prix in 2019. It was in a sort of unsurprising turn of events. It was a Ferrari front row lockout that they didn't win the race on. Mick Schumacher's had a bit of a slide coming out of the second Degner. He's got a very nice special helmet for this weekend, pale blue with some sort of pink flowers on, and just getting a bit wide onto the onto the concrete and almost onto the AstroTurf on the exit of Degner 2, but manages to keep it all together. Both Alpines still in the pits, Jenny?
They are still in the pits. I was speaking to the team radio.
There's a bit of a noise on the engine. I think it's the turbo check.
It's Carlos Sainz saying there's a bit of noise in the engine that he thinks is the turbo, so the team will have a look into that. Do carry on, Jenny.
Yeah, double DNF last time out with a huge engine failure for Esteban Ocon. Fernando Alonso also suffering a slightly less spectacular failure, but both of the drivers not having to take a power unit penalty this time out. The team have confirmed to me, which is good news. Let's see what happens as we continue towards the end of the season. There are more engine penalties looming for certain teams. I think Williams, one of the teams who still have they're running within their allocated engines, which is pretty impressive. And a quick update, Charles Leclerc saying on the radio that he thinks it's time for Inters.
Just on the Alpine engines there, Jenny, Fernando Alonso did say yesterday that he was definitely going to be taking a new engine soon, which I interpreted to mean Austin in 2 weeks' time, but not this weekend because overtaking is harder in Suzuka, so you try to avoid that if you could as a team.
Alonso's got his running tally now at 60 points for points that he thinks he's lost out on compared to that he due to reliability.
He's actually right, though. I mean,
no, I
know
him.
he does tend to sort of, this was my best ever race or my best ever lap. That is a bit of an Alonso thing. But he has lost a crazy amount of points this weekend and this year, sorry. And even so, he's only like 7 points behind Ocon in the championship. He should be absolutely destroying him in the championship. But it's been a tricky year for Alonso. And I'm sure that was probably in his mind, one of the many things in his mind when he decided to leave Alpine.
I got a PE warning.
Yeah, we're just discussing now.
Lando Norris getting a power unit warning on his steering wheel. Alpine saying yesterday that they are basically not reaping the rewards, but whatever the opposite of reaping the rewards is, for being very aggressive on their engine basically this year, is that with their aggressive development, it's basically compromised reliability, broadly speaking.
Well, it's a brand new design. They've gone the same way as Mercedes, the way that Mercedes first innovated. My vocabulary has evaded me this morning, and which Honda then followed the trend, which is this what they call a split turbo. So instead of the turbo and the compressor being together wherever they are, the back of the engine in these engines normally. You would expect that they put the compressor at the front of the cylinder V and the turbo at the back of the cylinder V, and that's a real difficult engineering challenge because of the length of the joining rod, which spins at 125,000 RPM. So it's very difficult to do, and Renault have done that for the first time for this year. So they've obviously got a bit of catching up to do, and I would imagine that they're referring to that.
Carlos Sainz goes quicker than Charles Leclerc. Sainz doing a 1 minute 47.758, 3/10 quicker than Leclerc. Bottas in third, 1.4 seconds back from the Ferraris. Norris in fourth, Magnuson fifth, Schumacher sixth. Joe and Tsunoda, the 8 drivers to have set a lap time. Tsunoda's done 4 laps now, 7 for Carlos Sainz, so he's done the most of everybody. Ricciardo and Gasly now out on circuit. Fernando Alonso has just left the pit lane and is halfway around his outlap. And Ferrari at the moment 1 and 2. Max Verstappen has just put his helmet on now with 33 minutes and 40 seconds on the clock. Jenny?
Valtteri Bottas out there reporting that he believes Inters would be better. Tyres already overheating, but if I look down my tyre list, nobody yet going onto Inters, just people pitting and others circulating on the full wets.
Well, we have this bizarre situation where the full wets are
not very good is the phrase you're looking for, I think, Jack.
Well, I was going to say useless, but that felt a bit too mean. But more in terms of if you're running out there, then you want to be on the intermediates. If you need full wets, then it'll be a red flag or you're behind the safety cars. So therefore, you want to keep your inters, as we were discussing earlier, because you only have a certain amount. So, but if you burn through your full wets, it doesn't make too much difference because chances are you won't want to be on them at any point.
Yeah, just to clarify what I mean by that, the drivers don't like the extreme wet tyre. They think it's not a very good tyre. It doesn't have a lot of grip. So if there's any wet running, they want to be on the intermediates as soon as they can. Sometimes the extreme wet is mandated if the conditions are bad enough, if there's enough water for the FIA to feel that that's required.
Basically, if the race starts behind the safety car, you have to be on the full wet tyre.
Yeah, but the drivers will be looking to get on the inters as soon as they possibly can in all circumstances, just because it's a much better tyre as far as they're concerned.
Reminds me a lot of when I did LMP2. We had a different manufacturer tyre, but you never wanted to use the full wet tyre, because after 2 laps it was chewed up regardless of how wet it was.
Really?
The tyre would become useless, and then we had to then go onto a cut slick, which was kind of our intermediate tyre, and that could run right until dry, or you could use it in so that had a huge range, and the extreme wet had no range at all. Very similar to the extreme wet we see in Formula 1.
The rain has eased off. Fernando Alonso coming into the final couple of corners, and no rain on his visor at all as he comes through the chicane, and then on the power down towards the right-hander. Well, the right-hander that always seems easy flat, but then gets a bit treacherous in wet conditions. I think Marcus Ericsson spun off behind the safety car at the start of the 2014 Japanese Grand Prix, and Timo Glock went in hard there in the Toyota in 2009, which allowed Kamui Kobayashi to make his Formula 1 debut.
And Robert Kubica also had a big crash there in the Williams at the
did
last
a couple of
race.
years ago, yeah.
I think it's harder than it looks, that corner.
Yeah. Is it? That final kink, or?
I've only driven Suzuka on a simulator, Jag. I've never raced there.
No way.
No, the only races I've done in Japan have been at Fuji.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I did not realise that.
Well, GP2 never went to Suzuka.
No. And you were in the garage with Mercedes for what, 3 years?
I ran the circuit, but
Yeah.
I never went off while running. I always managed to keep it on the tarmac.
That's Sam Bird, the Jaguar Formula E racer and former Mercedes development and reserve driver. Have you ever had a shunt while running the track? Like tripped up or anything, or are you not a tripper-upper when you run?
No,
Okay.
no, I'm not, Jack.
Yeah,
no.
some people trip up. Half an hour to go. Carlos Sainz is still quickest. He's been through the pits, back out on a set of full wet tyres. So Ferrari doing quite a bit of running here. 8 laps now for Sainz, 7 for Leclerc, whereas the Red Bulls are remaining in the pit lane. Sainz is coming back into the pits now, having done that extra sort of outlap. Leclerc is being told to expect rain in the last 15 minutes of the session, so that's in 15 minutes time. So we'll see if the Red Bulls decide to crack on now. Nicholas Latifi across the line to go 12th quickest, 4.6 seconds away from Carlos Sainz. And just getting a look at Daniel Ricciardo coming into the first Degner. That all went smoothly. Second Degner, taking it very, very steady and just getting a tiny bit loose on the exit, but nothing particularly dramatic for Daniel Ricciardo. Not seeing that many slides actually this afternoon, and but compared to Singapore, where it was so slidey and in the treacherous street circuit conditions, but a lot more grip broadly speaking on Suzuka. And one of the Hasses is now coming through the first sector, and that is going to be, who is that? It's Kevin Magnuson. So Magnuson's still out there, and Schumacher is back in the pit lane. So that's 8 laps now for Kevin Magnuson. So he's getting quite a lot of running in as well.
So one of the reasons why, Jack, you will see different tracks, especially in the wet, having drivers having different issues with a wet circuit is because of we call it the macro and micro roughness of the surface in the tarmac. So Singapore would have been a relayed surface in many areas, and with that comes quite a low micro roughness circuit. also the oil will come to the surface of the circuit, and therefore you get quite a slippery track that then doesn't dry very quickly. Whereas Suzuka, the tarmac will be slightly different, the way that it drains and heats up, and how the tyre interacts with the surface will be different, and that's why we're seeing probably a higher grip level here, and it being easier to drive than Singapore.
Max Verstappen is out on the intermediate tyres, so he's left the pits on intermediates. So has Valtteri Bottas in the in the Alfa Romeo, and so has Esteban Ocon in the Alpine. Eleanor says Ralph Aaron has been running in the new Prema World Endurance and ELMS entries this year, apparently.
Okay, Max, expecting the rain to pick up in the next 5 to 10 minutes. It will hit turns 13, 14 first. Keep us posted.
Verstappen getting a little update on the weather. Eleanor also saying Ralph Aaron's little brother Paul is a Mercedes Junior driver who's just been announced that he's doing F3 with Prema next year. So Paul Aaron then. There we go. Not Aaron Paul, but Paul Aaron doing F3 with Prema. So he'll be a front runner, you would have thought. Nicholas Latifi won't be. He's in the gravel on the exit of the hairpin. The grass. To be fair, I don't think he made it to the gravel, but he's now got back on circuit and recovered. The Canadian gets back going again. See what happened to him. Just coming up into the tight left hairpin, got on the brakes, and the thing didn't stop. Locked the fronts. Oh, he did end up in the gravel. Here's his radio.
You okay? Can you continue?
Off, but I'm okay, yeah.
Off, but I'm okay, he says. Just skidding, non-stop skidding into the gravel trap there for Nicholas Latifi. Verstappen does the fastest first sector of anybody on his 7/10 up on Carlos Sainz through sector 1 on his first lap here. Max Verstappen. Now, admittedly, the track is drier and he is on intermediate tyres, but nevertheless, he doesn't hang about, does he, when he goes onto circuit, Verstappen? Like, he's not getting a sighter out there, is he, on his first timed lap?
No, normally FP1, lap 1, he's already normally a second up the road, but we normally see him out much earlier than this. I remember Spa when he went out and obliterated everybody early doors, and we're seeing something similar. Okay, Sainz and Leclerc and the rest of the field have done the time on wet tyres. It does certainly seem like Inters now is the way forward, Jack.
25 minutes to go. Ocon is also setting the first sector. To be fair to the Frenchman, what does he do compared to Verstappen in sector 1? He's quicker by 1/10 of a second. So Esteban Ocon getting on with it too in the Alpine. Verstappen onto the brakes into the chicane. Through the right and the left. Who was it he biffed off there? Was it Raikkonen a few years ago, Max Verstappen? And then I think he got a 5-second time penalty, and he's 3.7 seconds quicker than Carlos Sainz. So track drying, intermediates the tyre to be on, and Ocon is going quicker than Verstappen at the moment, though, still. So reasonable run this from Esteban Ocon. Bottas in the Alfa Romeo is improving. Joe and Stroll have both left the pits on intermediate tyres as well. So the lap times will continue to drop for the next 5 or 10 minutes, and then we're expecting maybe a bit more rain. Tsunoda goes up to 9th fastest ahead of Lando Norris. Bottas goes 2nd quickest, 1.1 seconds slower than Verstappen. Ocon, sorry, there's some fans in the crowd, huge fans of Gunther Steiner. One has a Gunther Steiner face mask on, and the other has a sign saying, "Gunther, will you marry me?" And they've just shown that on camera, and then cut to Gunther Steiner, who's chuckling along on the pit wall. So that was an amusing moment. Perez coming up through the hairpin now. He is on the intermediate tyres, and strong run from Perez in Singapore. He had a lot of pressure from Leclerc.
He did. I think that's his strongest drive to date in Formula One. I think he managed the race extremely well through what was a very tricky condition from start to finish. You know, how it transitioned from quite a slippery intermediate circuit to a slippery slick circuit. I thought that he drove fantastically well.
Took the victory, and that didn't quite move him up to 2nd in the championship. He's 2 points behind Charles Leclerc in that particular title fight. Verstappen improves to go 9/10 clear of Esteban Ocon, but Ocon is going, he's 3 tenths quicker than Verstappen in Sector 1. Perez goes up into 4th place on a 1 minute 46.2, 2.8 seconds slower than Verstappen, but that was Verstappen's second time. Carlos Sainz in 5th and Charles Leclerc in 6th at the moment, the 2 Ferraris. Jenny?
Yeah, and Leclerc just heading out now. He's put on ascent of the Inters, as has Carlos Sainz. So let's see what the Ferrari can do on the Inters.
Ocon through the middle sector and is still going quicker than Max Verstappen. So this looks like this might be a decent lap from Esteban Ocon, maybe to the top of the times. His teammate Fernando Alonso still in the pit lane at the moment. Here comes Ocon through the final corner, and he goes 3 tenths quicker than Max Verstappen. So Ocon to the top of the times now on a 43.0, 3 tenths quicker than Verstappen, 2 seconds quicker than Bottas, 3 seconds quicker than Perez. Then it's Sainz 5th, Leclerc 6th, Ricciardo 7th, Alonso 8th, Magnuson 9th, and Gasly 10th. Tsunoda, Norris, Schumacher, Latifi and Zhou, the 15 drivers to have set lap times. Sound you can hear is Alex Albon. Down through the gears through Degner 1, down a couple more into the right-hander of Degner 2, and then heads up towards the hairpin. George Russell, still the only driver yet to go out, as Jenny was explaining earlier on. They're changing that power unit because of an oil leak they found this morning. Hamilton, too, has only done an install lap, basically, quite a long time ago now. So he is still in the pit lane. Same is true of Sebastian Vettel. So whether they are just... because I think the rain's starting to come down a little bit now because it's coming up through a Spoon corner. So we'll see how much more running we get in this session. Leclerc is on course to do the fastest first sector of anyone. Verstappen has returned to the pit lane, but there is some more rain coming now as Albon downshifts through 130R and then into the chicane. Leclerc's first sector is pretty strong. Albon in the Williams. Ooh, there's a bit of wheel spin. Gets back on the throttle and out across the line. And Alex Albon goes up into 5th place with that lap on the intermediates, 2.7 seconds slower than Esteban Ocon. Bottas is about to improve and he gets up into 3rd place, goes quicker than Sergio Perez. Leclerc is still improving in the middle sector, but it certainly looks like it's getting wetter. More spray coming up from the cars at the moment. He's coming through Spoon, the long left-hander, now heading down towards 130R. 20 minutes and 13 seconds to go, and he is a 10th up on Esteban Ocon's time here, Charles Leclerc, as he comes into the left-hander. Now onto the brakes. Alonso has gone out on the intermediates too, so he is going to do a little bit of running. Still Hamilton in the pits, because Vettel's just left the pit lane too, so only Hamilton in the pit lane, and Charles Leclerc goes quickest, a 1 minute 42.634. A reasonable amount of running today. I think when you look at the weather in this sort of session, you're going to be like, oh, we're not going to see much, but we've had a reasonable amount. Jenny?
Yeah, so Lewis Hamilton still in the garage. On the other side, I think he's just leaving now, actually. Russell has now got out after that engine change. I wonder just if they missed the best of the weather there. It feels like they went out when everyone else is going, yeah, starting to rain, let's go.
Yeah, it's, well, a lot of people were predicting that the weather would come in, wouldn't they, in about, well, now or 5 minutes' time. So we'll see what Hamilton can do. The lap times are still improving, to be fair. Carlos Sainz is about to go quicker than Leclerc. Fernando Alonso is just on a first sector that's quicker than Leclerc. Leclerc had a lovely slide through the second Degner there. Very lovely stuff from the Monegasque. Here comes Albon across the line to go 9th quickest, and Sainz does go quicker than Leclerc, but only by 0.07 of a second. Fernando Alonso is 6 tenths up on both of them. Here comes the Spaniard. He's on the fastest middle sector. Gets it stopped into the chicane. Back on the power, out across the line. And Alonso goes fastest, a 1 minute 42.248, 3 tenths quicker than Carlos Sainz. So reasonable effort there from Fernando Alonso with 18.5 minutes to go. But weather looks worse, but the times are still improving.
I think that's because they've moved quite a bit of the standing water, and they're able to generate heat well through all the change of directions in Sector 1. on those intermediate tyres, which means that they can continue to run even though the conditions are worsening.
I think Verstappen's done for the day, or for the session. Off goes the balaclava and the helmet with 18 minutes to go, so he's happy with his running in 5th position. Here comes Hamilton on the intermediate tyres and out over the start-finish straight. Just trying to... Andrew Benson, Hamilton and Suzuka, in my head feels like a sort of, you know, match made in heaven sort of vibe, but I'm just trying to think of sort of great Hamilton drives at Suzuka. Maybe, was it 2014, obviously, a red flag, obviously, but I think he caught and passed Rosberg, or was that 16? Maybe that was 14. He had sort of a good race in the wet there, but...
It wasn't 16, I think it was 14.
Yeah, but I don't remember a huge amount of stunning... You know, when you think of Hamilton in Japan, Fuji is the one that leaps to mind.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? He admits it as well. He's won a couple of times here, I think, Hamilton, but given the level of his talent and this being, you know, one of the archetypal drivers' circuits, you would expect him to go better here than he has done. But he just hasn't. And sometimes it's a bit like that. I was talking to Fernando Alonso in Singapore. He's always outstanding at Singapore. And I was asking him, why are you outstanding at Singapore? And he was a bit awkward at first. He was like, I'm a night person, was his first answer. I was like, you can do better than that. But in his answer, when he did finally give one, he went on to... He actually said himself, without being prompted, and I'm not very good at Spa. So I've still got some stuff to learn, even at the age of 41. And even, like, all-time great drivers like Hamilton and Alonso, for some reason, there's some circuits they just don't quite click with. That's not to say Hamilton's not really fast at Suzuka. He is. But it's just not a circuit where things have really come together for him, and the same with Alonso at Spa.
Because you think of Hamilton and you think of Montreal or Hungary or Silverstone or so many of these tracks, or China even, I think, was one, where they're just sort of unstoppable, and then you go to some circuits and they never quite blow everyone away.
Speaking of the conditions, back about the conditions, Jack, I think Lewis Hamilton, Mercedes might have missed the window where the track was at its best. He's just set a lap time that is 5.3 seconds slower than what Alonso has managed on the intermediate tyre. So I think he's missed the window by 5 minutes in his Mercedes.
Yeah, it certainly looks that way, doesn't it? George Russell has made it out of the pit lane also. Daniel Ricciardo has just been straight on at the chicane at the end of the lap. Russell goes 17th fastest, 3.8 seconds off Alonso. So I think that's a pretty astute observation, because we're now seeing lots of cars going off the circuit. Carlos Sainz has just been off at Spoon. And Charles Leclerc, coming into Degner 1, has turned into the right-hander. Oh, he's had a huge moment. What a save from Charles Leclerc. Clunked the curb on the way into Degner 1, had a huge slide and managed to save it, but he has then been off. Is that Degner 1 again? I think he's been off 2 laps in a row at Degner. The first one was an amazing save. The second one was an actual trip through the gravel for Leclerc. So I think those who were on intermediates on the drier running are now getting caught out a little bit as the rain comes down, as you say. So Yuki Tsunoda just coming through Spoon. So tentative to get back on the throttle, and here's George Russell's radio.
Tyres are not biting, it's so weird. Really sliding a lot.
Tyres just aren't biting, says George Russell. Really sliding a lot. Hamilton goes up to 13th quickest, 2.3 seconds away from Fernando Alonso, but the top 11 in the timings are all back in the pits now. So I think this is the sort of heavier rain that we were anticipating. Tsunoda staying out there and goes 19th fastest. Stroll in the pits, Vettel in the pits. The only people on circuit: Ricciardo, Hamilton, Albon, Gasly, Latifi, Russell and Tsunoda. 13 minutes and 33 seconds on the clock. Fernando Alonso back in the garage, and that may well be the end of his running, as he is quickest at the moment. Amit says Suzuka is definitely a bucket list circuit for me to go to one day, and the wet day today isn't changing that opinion. Although Formula E going to Tokyo means a tough choice for which race to attend. They won't be near each other on the calendar, would they? But that'd be a great double-header. Do a Formula E race in Tokyo and then get the train down to the Formula 1 race in Suzuka. That'd be the dream. 13 minutes to go. Leclerc's still running, but he's gone back out on the full wets. That's interesting. So Verstappen being like, right, well, I'm done for the day because the conditions have got worse. Leclerc wanting to go back out on the full wets.
And Leclerc's convinced about really taking a lot of inside curb. I mean, he's now done that. Every lap that we've seen him, he's really taken a chunk out of that inside curb. And on the intermediate tyre, when the rain picked up, it really wasn't doing him any favours, as we see the rain really just flashing off his visor there. It's really, really wet now. Really wet as we come towards Sector 3.
Yeah, coming up into Spoon, it is huge spray coming off the back of Leclerc's car. There must be a stat out there that Japan must be the most wettest Grand Prix.
Yeah, we don't have a Grand Prix in Manchester, so...
Well, yeah. But I'm convinced that it's always... Because in the same way that you always think of Spa being wet, but it never is. It never actually is.
I think you're probably right, but Brazil have been running it close, I think. You get quite a lot of wet running in Brazil.
Yeah, but then you think of wet Brazilian Grand Prix, 03, 2016. Can't really think of...
2012?
Yeah, 12, another one, yeah.
Oh, yeah, with that title decider. Yeah, that was good. But Japan's always just wet. Even the first Japanese Grand Prix, 1976, chucked it down. Unbelievable weather. Unbelievable weather. They were, that was one of those, they wouldn't have run that race today.
Well, it doesn't help that they're running it in they run the Japanese Grand Prix in typhoon season.
Well, this is kind of what I'm alluding to, is that ever since Japan's come on the calendar, they always run it in the wet part of the year.
It's interesting because Formula 1 wants to change the date of the Japanese Grand Prix.
Oh, really?
They want to run it in April. In the spring, because if you were going to pick a time to go to Japan, it would be the spring, right?
Yeah.
With the cherry blossoms and all the rest of it, and Fuji's still got this cap of snow on the top, and it's just
after China.
Exactly, but for some reason, and I don't know what the reason is, and I have asked Formula 1 what is the reason, and they don't know the reason either. But the Japanese Grand Prix organisers, which is effectively Honda, because Honda owns Suzuka, they don't want the race in the spring, and they just won't budge.
Wow.
And so we're stuck with typhoon season, I'm afraid. So that's why it rains. Yeah.
I like it. That's good. That's good knowledge. Yeah, spring in Japan. Be lovely. But no, as you can hear, lots of rain and no cars. So we'll just now fade up this for the rest of the last 10 minutes.
It's quite soothing, actually, isn't it?
It is quite nice. For those of you who are... Well, that's ruined it, the old cooling fans and whatever. 10 minutes to go in the session. Everybody is back in the pit lane. Jenny?
Most people out of their cars now, including Max Verstappen, who's just standing around with his mask on, his baseball cap on, watching the screens and having a chat with his engineers. Just while we've got a lull in proceedings, Williams, Sam Bird, I am intrigued to know, in your new team manager at Williams role, who would you put in that car? Because we've got a couple of gaps. We've got Haas, who still have one driver to sign, and Williams. And I just wondered who you thought you'd put in the Williams.
Here's some Schumacher radio.
Yeah, understood.
So Schumacher saying he got massively blocked by Alonso there. Should have just gone around the outside of him at 130R. That's what Schumachers and Alonso's do.
On about the driver lineups, Jenny, I'm going to delegate Andrew Benson to speak about that. That's what I'm going to do.
Well, I'm going to say what I'm told is going to happen, and then Sam can offer his opinion. How about that, Jenny?
It's not the way around I would have done it, but you go for it.
Okay, so what I believe is going to happen is that the Gasly move to Alpine will go through. He will be replaced at AlphaTauri by Nick de Vries. Nico Hülkenberg will make a return at Haas in place of Mick Schumacher.
Really?
And Williams have an empty seat as a result of all that. And their plan at the moment, I believe, is to run that seat with Logan Sargent, who's in Formula 2 at the moment, as long as he gets a super license. If by the end of the season, if he doesn't, then they've got a bit of a problem on their hands. And I suppose Mick Schumacher is a possibility. He's still a vague option at Haas, but I think really they'd like to get rid of him. Sam?
It would be nice to see an American on the grid. I don't know too much about Logan Sargent. I know he's a talent. I know that he was very competitive in Formula 3. From what I've seen in F2, he's been up there. He hasn't set the world on fire, but it might be a case of him picking up the seat, being in the right place at the right time. I remember, I don't think he really had the budget to do Formula 2 maybe last year or the year before, but he seems to have landed on his feet in the Williams Driver Academy, so, good luck to him.
I'm sort of... Logan Sargent has that sort of junior career that I think is absolutely decent, and I think we've been so sort of... not spoiled, that's not quite the right word, but these days... you just have to win everything first year if you want to be thought of as good. You know what I mean? Because that's what Leclerc did, that's what Russell did, that's what Norris did. All these guys came in and just won the first year, won. And Logan Sargent, okay, he hasn't managed to do that, but he finished third, in F3, and with Prema in 2020, and then last year he did F3 again, but he was with Charouz. And then this year he did Formula 2, and he's third in the championship at the moment, but with Carlin. And I'm not knocking Carlin, they're a great team, but they aren't Prema ART level of, where if you're in one of those cars, you've got to sort of be winning the championship kind of vibe in a way. And the same as it was with Dams back in the day, The Carlin are not they're a really, really good Formula 2 team for sure, and Trevor Carlin's a legend and all of that, but they aren't that peak Prema team. And
no,
so
absolutely.
I think to be third,
the guy that's already wrapped up the title is driving an MP.
Well, that is true. That's a fair point. That is a fair point.
The other thing to bear in mind about drivers coming through is that in the last few years, Formula One's seen an absolutely exceptional young generation of drivers. Leclerc, Verstappen, Russell and Norris are absolute world class. And, you don't get that number of high quality drivers coming through in that short a time normally.
Yeah.
And so it's not, but that doesn't mean that every driver who comes to Formula One who's not quite at that caliber doesn't deserve a Formula One seat.
No, and now I feel like we're knocking him before he's even driven the car. So, I think that if Williams do go down that route, then they've done it for a reason, and good. All I'm going to say is, he must be a good talent if he's going to be jumping in one of these cars.
Hülkenberg at Haas.
I know, but if you were Haas, is there a better option than him? I think there probably isn't when you start to put it down on paper. Maybe that's the unknown number that I got yesterday. Maybe that was... It wasn't the tax man, it was Günther Steiner.
No, taxman's 0300, starts with 0300, that's how you know.
But the funny thing is that Hülkenberg and Magnuson is an interesting combination, isn't it?
Because they did not get on in...
I think they put that to bed, from what I was hearing in Singapore last weekend, that it's all kind of... They've grown up a bit after the... I can't say the quote, can I? But
I don't know, can we say the quote, Joe?
He probably doesn't.
Oh, Joe doesn't know what the quote is. So
yeah.
You all know what the quote is, everybody. I just wanted to say it on the radio. 4 minutes and 23 seconds to go in the session. Everybody's still in the pits at the moment. Sounds like someone's heading out, though, isn't it? Heading towards the end of the pit lane. Yeah, Hülkenberg, while not a particularly exciting option necessarily, I would agree that he's a solid... Well, I always thought Hülkenberg was very, very good. But he must be...
He's exceptional.
Yeah.
I did GP2 the year after he won GP2, and he was, in Frederic Vasseur's eyes, who was the boss of ART at the time, he's now the boss at Alfa Romeo. He was the absolute benchmark of professionalism and pace and talent in GP2. He came into GP2, he won it first year. He's a driver that... I'm flabbergasted that he holds the record for most starts without a podium. That really blows my mind that someone with such talent hasn't got a podium.
Well, the thing is, I agree, he's obviously extremely talented, and everybody agrees with you on that one. But it just things just seem to go wrong for him whenever he's in a position to get a podium. So he crashed into the inside wall in Baku, for example. I forget the year. He went off.
17.
Yeah, he went off in Hockenheim that year when it was the crazy race when everyone was
18.
going off. But again, you know, he went onto the drag strip. But it was another opportunity for a podium. And actually, that mistake there, which was a mistake that lots of people made,
Leclerc
was what convinced Cyril de Beetbull, who was the Renault team boss at the time, that he was never going to make it, because it just it perhaps wasn't the most rational of choices, but it was, because he was signing Daniel Ricciardo in his place. But no, it wasn't. It was Ocon who replaced him with them, wasn't it? But here's some radio from Joe.
Massive increase of standing water, sector 1.
Copy.
So Joe letting us know the track is a lot wetter now it's rained.
But a Beetbull basically thought, well, it's just never going to happen for Hülkenberg. It was like he took it as a sign. And it is true that things just kept going wrong.
Yeah, but a Beetbull thought it was never going to happen for Jolyon Palmer, so you can't really judge his judgment, can you?
I'm not judging it, I'm just reporting, Jack.
But also there was the one for me where Hülkenberg was, what was it, 2012? No, it wasn't 2012.
Yeah, 2012 in Brazil when he was leading and he took Hamilton out.
No, Hamilton took him out, didn't he?
No.
Was it the other way around?
Yeah, Hülkenberg.
But yeah, he was right on for a podium then. Less than 2 minutes to go. Bottas and Joe are the two drivers who went out onto the circuit, both on the full wet tyre, just to do a practice start.
The corollary of all that as well, Jack, is Mick Schumacher looks like he's out of Formula One after two, what I would say, unexceptional years. I would say unexceptional also, but I don't know, he hasn't, it felt like he'd almost saved himself a bit this year, is how I felt. Last year felt like an acceptable, you're going to get the numbers out for me now and prove me wrong. But last year it felt like he was, well, obviously last year he was up against Mazepin and beat Mazepin, so that was fine, but that's all he can do. Then this year with Magnuson, it started off tough, and then it kind of got a little bit better, it felt, as the season progressed to a point that was not too bad. I think not too bad is fair, but the qualifying comparison, you can get the points up while I'm reading out the qualifying comparison if you want, but it's 11 of the races where you can fairly compare. It's 11.4 to Magnuson at an average of 0.279, and Kevin Magnuson's a very fine Formula One driver, but he's not absolute top level, so I would say that's not good enough to stay in Formula One. You make Schumacher.
But then this is, this is a bit too deep a chat to get into with 20 seconds left on the clock. But then there is also that, and I don't know how much of a modern thing this is, of how if someone isn't top level, then they sort of get declared rubbish. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's a real thing that happens these days, and you can see it in big evidence with someone like an Albon and a Gasly. Whoa, big moment for Bottas coming into 130R, kept it together, went into the runoff area, didn't McNish it, but that will be a bit of a scary one, that, for Valtteri Bottas. Is he going to return to the pits, or is he going to do a practice start? Comes out of the final corner, he's going to stay out there and finish the lap, Bottas. And Bottas also is another great example of all these people who, when they're in the top team and they get beaten by your Verstappens and your Hamiltons, they sort of get written off. But then you go to a midfield team and these guys are really superb racing drivers. And okay, they're not the greatest that the sport has ever seen, but that doesn't therefore mean that they are, rubbish. And that's kind of where I'm, coming at with the Schumachers and the, even the Logan Sargents coming in, when we're comparing them to your Leclercs and your Russells and your Norrises. Well, not everyone's going to be at that level. But anyway, that's a bit too deep and philosophical for no minutes to go in free practice one.
Yeah, a bit of a snap there, standing water before the 130R.
Copy, just in the replay now, yeah.
Bit of a snap there, says Valtteri Bottas, which feels like a bit of an understatement. Racing 5 says, I really love the idea of this in April time. The bonkers crazy rain is the only reason I'm never hugely excited about this track. And Japan being so beautiful at that time of year. And we actually said this today. It's the first time we see cars on track at Suzuka since 2019, and it's wet and you don't get to see it properly. Anyway, session over. Fernando Alonso finishes it quickest. What's the headline going to be on the BBC Sport website, Andrew Benson?
We're not even doing a story on this one. It's just a
Really?
couple of paragraphs in the live.
Oh. Well, don't go to the BBC Sport website to read all about this session, because Andrew Benson can't be bothered to write a story. 1 minute 42.
It's the middle of the night still in England.
Alonso, yeah.
And it's a wet practice session.
Have a rest. Alonso quickest, Sainz second, Leclerc third.
And it wasn't my decision.
Ocon fourth, Magnuson fifth. Was it Mark Wilkins? Verstappen sixth, Schumacher seventh, Norris eighth, Bottas ninth, Sergio Perez 10th. Joe, Ricciardo, Hamilton, Stroll and Albon the top 15. Gasly, Latifi, Russell, Tsunoda and Vettel the top 20. Here's Stroll's radio.
I'm in limbo mode. What do I do?
Okay, stay out, driver defaults, stay out, we'll do a driver default. MFA grey 01 OK, MFA grey 01 OK.
And that's Stroll in limp home mode. Let's see if Jenny Gow can be bothered to do her job and get us off air.
I think we're all in limp home mode, aren't we, right now? 2 minutes to go until we come off air, don't worry.
That was Sam doing the marathon, I think. Did you get into limp home mode?
Yeah, the last 8 miles were limp home mode. I didn't have a driver default, though.
No change of setting. You couldn't toggle. Free practice 2 begins at 7 o'clock. It will be a 90-minute free practice 2 because there's a Pirelli tyre test taking place, so that's something to look forward to. You can get in touch with us at BBC F1. Alonso finishes top of everything, but Jack Nicholls, not a lot we can take from that session as they do their practice starts now. We're not expecting it, even if it does rain on Sunday, to be this wet. So a little bit of an irrelevant session.
Well, what I find interesting is Ferrari choose to do 15 laps and the Red Bull choose to do 4. I always find that interesting.
Ferrari have got a new floor on this weekend, which I know it's wet, but they probably wanted to put a few miles on, I would have thought.
Yeah, potentially. But, you see very different levels of and Alfa Romeo lapping non-stop. And again, Hamilton doing 6 laps. So that difference I always find interesting.
It is of noteworthy, let's put it like that. Fernando Alonso tops the session with Sainz and Leclerc in second and third. And that's all I can really think of to say, because it was just one of those sessions. They go round, they drive, they finish. Sam Bird. Anyone stand out as having? I mean, Russell, I suppose. Mercedes, they've got the power unit change. That's about it. Yeah,
not much to really talk about there, Jenny. I think.
So there we go.
Obviously, Fernando Alonso doing Fernando Alonso things. The Alpine looked competitive, I've got to say, throughout the session. They looked strong in the wet, so
let's see if they can finish a race.
Yeah.
That would help them out. So let's see Max Verstappen going for his championship, the second attempt this weekend. Can he do it? You'll have to join us across the weekend. As I said, free practice 2 gets underway at 7 o'clock. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live. Good morning and good night.